I'm Alexander Larson, a risk manager. In this series of episodes, I caught up with Paul Edge, who's based out of Portugal. We discussed all things blockchain, cryptocurrencies, including his own stablecoin that he developed. Part 2 of the episodes, we looked at how blockchain can be utilized from a risk management perspective, from audit, reducing fraud, to supply chains, and all other aspects of risk management. This is Risk Managers Getting Coffee. What about blockchain in terms of using blockchain with risk management, for example? Does it work with things like supply chain or fraud, or what kind of applications would it be useful for?
Okay, so one strong aspect is supply chain that you mentioned, because blockchain is a database that is outside of the organizational structure. So with blockchain, if you have a database that's only inside the company, you can create some value. But if you have a database that's shared through all companies, then the ability to create value increases immensely. So if you have a supply chain, you can share the same database using blockchain. And so you can say that a certain component gets passed from one company to another company to another company, and it's all stored in the same database.
Okay.
You can say that if you have an assembly, you've got certain components that are joined together, and you can trace the origins of each of those components.
Okay.
And if you own a complete system, you can know exactly where every single thing inside that complete system came from. So
just as an example, the horse meat scandal in the UK recently, or a couple of years ago, where they found traces of horse meat in their I think it was their beef, in a sort of blockchain type database. They would be able to very quickly trace where potentially this contamination has occurred.
Exactly, yes. And from a financial point of view, you get a similar thing. If you have a complex trade that is backed by it's hedged by lots of other things.
Yeah.
And those in turn are hedged by other things and other entities. In the 2008 financial crisis, the Lehman Brothers collapsing was a big problem because no one knew how that would affect the rest of the system.
Right.
If you have a shared database, you can know exactly who's the counterparty to who. If one person fails, will there be enough collateral in the whole system? Will it have knock-on effects? And you can, having that single database, but to see where the components of a certain hedging strategy is created, that gives a lot of transparency to the financial system.
Right. Here's a question then, talking about databases. Why couldn't we, or haven't we already done this, just not using blockchain?
The problem would be trusting that database. How do you know that somebody hasn't changed a record or hasn't accessed the database and changed something? How do you know? How do you get access to that database? Can anybody join that database, or do you have to have permission from the government to join it? No, to actually be able to add data to the database, you need to be trusted. One problem with blockchain is that the data that goes onto the database is not necessarily true.
Yeah, so that's still at risk, because obviously I can lie, I can put it in, and it's not changeable now after I put it in, but it still might not be true.
But you're committed to saying that this data I've submitted is true.
Yeah, and the blockchain means that it would be very easy to trace who that person was that submitted this false data, for example.
Yes.
And I'm also thinking even just things like, oh, this is fair trade.
Yeah.
If we have a chocolate bar, it says fair trade, I'm just assuming it's fair trade. I don't know where it's come from. I don't know the sort of, from bean to production,
Yep.
to bar. Blockchain is there the ability, you mentioned QR codes, is there ability on packaging to have a QR code where a customer can scan and see where essentially it's come from?
Yep. If you had a specific QR code on each bar, and you had a different barcode for each package, you could be able to trace back all the ingredients, not just one,
right,
all the way back to source, and you'll be able to compare it to a chocolate bar next to it and see how it differs. If you want to be sure that people are creating things in humane environments,
yes,
you still need someone to confirm that right at the end of it that this particular factory is
exactly, it meets certain standards, absolutely,
yes.
yeah. But essentially, as an end user, the trust is there, the transparency is there.
Yeah.
And of course, this is big nowadays. You just need to see on Twitter people, digging into all sorts of stuff to say, well, hang on, this and that and the next thing. Well, if it's all transparent, number one, it will put a lot more pressure on companies to make sure their supply chain is on top of things, which is a challenge in itself because companies might not want to put themselves in that situation. But then that's how new companies, new forming companies, or existing companies that are looking to have competitive advantage might see the market going. If we can show transparency that no one else can, and trust in our supply chain, that might be enough to win us customers. It's a fascinating concept.
The same ideas can be applied in the financial world as well.
Mm-hmm.
So an audit is checking that your supply chain of transactions is correct.
Yes.
So rather than having an audit every year or every quarter to say that you would be able to say, I've transacted with a certain company. I have the receipt. On the receipt has the QR code. I can trace that QR code all the way through the company's transactions right to the way it reports at the end of the year. And I'm back the other way.
Yeah.
Some reports here, I can say that I can follow the financial transactions all the way back to my transaction that I know I transacted with this company. So I know just from my single transaction with the company, I know that their whole audit is correct.
Right. So that cuts out probably a lot of costs, I would imagine.
A lot of costs, and you can also be completely transparent about your financials at all points in time. There's no annual audit. There's no need for someone to come in and look at your books. Everything
because it's there.
It's there. Yes. Yeah, it starts going, and that if the transactions happen on the blockchain, then you know that those are true transactions, and you know that there's no fraud being committed.
Yeah. This is Risk Managers Getting Coffee.